job is not to provide them with a father. Your child is not to provide them with a magical childhood. I'm going to do a video on that coming up, magical childhoods. Your job is not to make sure that your children are accepted by their peers, or that they have friends or birthday parties or Christmas presents, or like the list of things that people think children need today are astronomical and very unrealistic.
But I responded and just said, Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Well, I told you last week about a situation related to the former vlogger of 8 passengers, Ruby Franke, and her business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt, and a situation that went down in Washington County, Utah on August 30th related to RF and EF, the youngest children of Ruby's, and how she and Jodi were being held without bond after a neighbor discovered RF at his door, which is her youngest son, asking for food and water. Now, the revelations that have been coming out are fast and furious, and I have been doing my best to keep things updated. Over Labor Day weekend, I was updating and sharing affidavits, probable cause statements, and now there's actual charges. We also know a little bit more about who Jodi Hildebrandt is, some involvement she's had previously in cases that have destroyed families and altered people's lives completely in the same respect. Maybe not as bad as what's happened with Ruby, but there seems to be a pattern of behavior with Jodi and getting involved with her clients that were once patients. It's a mess. And Kevin Franke, along with her sister, coming out and speaking about their belief and their thoughts about the situation, and so much more. For the weekend, I also spent quite a bit of time, and I went through most of the audio related to the dispatch in Washington County, and I posted the whole 8 or 9 minutes. It's not all of it, but it's a good chunk of it because the call took basically all day for them. But you can check out my Instagram at Without a Crystal Ball, or Facebook at facebook.com/withoutacrystalball.
He just said 14, the male does have duct tape around each ankle. He's not telling the RP why, and said that there's on his wrists and ankles. He's becoming, or correction, the RP is becoming emotional regarding the child's health. Not sure if they're related. When asking the RP's parents info, he said his mom is Ruby Franke, unknown where she lives. And I do have a Ruby Franke spelling with an E on the end of Franke address out of Springville. Only involvement was a traffic offense a couple of days ago.
12X511, 314, medical is going to transport him. Said that his wounds are in need of immediate care.
We found out, maybe shockingly, not so shockingly, that Ruby Franke had been arrested after what had seemed like years of her on social media bragging about mistreating her children. Now, a lot of you in my comments have asked me why I'm now speaking about the situation, and I can share with you that in 2020, I did several videos about Ruby and her husband, and accusations that she made and things that she said, things that her kids said on the channel, and how I received letters from her attorneys threatening to sue me if I didn't remove my videos. So obviously I was reluctant to say anything until there was a criminal case, because honestly, I didn't want to go through another frivolous. Just to share with you, I had received an email from them back in June, and it says, there are multiple statements across your various videos which are defamatory per se, including that my clients are exploiting their children as workers in violation of labor laws and are forcing their children to sleep on the floor, even though she said that in a video, and that they allow their children to go hungry. These statements and others have caused harm to my clients, including, as you are aware, resulting in a bogus Child Protective Service investigation. So I kept getting tons of emails. These were in June of 2020. So I was reluctant to say a word until there was some sort of legal process in this case. So now here we are. It is September 5th, and she was arrested on August 30th, 2023. Now, both of her children were located in Washington County, but this was not where she lives. So if you know anything about Ruby, she actually lives up in Springville, Utah, which is 255 miles away from where they were located. And we're learning more that neighbors in her Springfield area had contacted CPS multiple times about her kids, claiming that she had basically kicked Kevin out about a year ago. And once she kicked him out, she covered all of her windows with either paper or with blinds so that no one could see in. And the kids were left for weeks at a time by themselves. One neighbor told NBC that her youngest daughter, EF, would be seen roaming around the streets looking for food, looking for kids to play with, and that Ruby would be gone for weeks at a time and her kids would be left home alone. Multiple calls were apparently made to CPS in September of 2022, but they never made contact with Ruby. And when police showed up at the house, no one answered the door, per NBC. So with heat that was on, obviously it seems like Ruby made the decision that she, couldn't leave her kids alone. So she decided to take them down to St. George, where her business partner lives, named Jodi Hildebrandt. And that's where RF and EF were found. But this was only after RF had escaped through a window and ran to the neighbor's house to get help. So it was RF, who was 12, that escaped through a window, climbed out, and ran over to the neighbors and let them know where to find his little sister. And he also believed another one of his sisters was at the house as well. The police didn't actually get contact with them until hours later because they had to get a search warrant. Now, another thing that we learned through the dispatch audio, was that Ruby didn't show up until 3:30 in the afternoon. So the initial call was made at 10:50 a.m. and Ruby did not show up into the area at the PD's office until 3:30 p.m. When police wanted to make contact with her, Ruby fled, and then she showed up back at Jodi's house where police made contact with her. But due to the fact that she was trying to get access to her children, police put a medical hold and they preventing her from having any access to both her daughter and her son that were in the hospital.
On this case that we're working, we have the custodial parent of the child in the ER. She just came to our PD and then she took off when we said cops will talk to her in a second. So we're hoping maybe someone can go to the cop at the ER can restrict access from her to her kids. That's something you can relay to them. Her name is Ruby, and her name should be in CAD comments.
The police, the affidavit, which we went through yesterday or last week, is pretty shocking, and everything that we're learning is obviously shocking. But what came out with the charges is more than what was in the affidavit. So she was officially charged September 1st, and she's now facing 6 counts of aggravated CA, and it's related to 3 counts related to her 12-year-old son, RF, and 3 counts related to her 10-year-old daughter, EF. Now, both her and Jodi are charged with the exact same offenses. So Ruby is charged with 1 count related to RF, which has to do with the restraining of him, and the injuries that were caused as a result of that, which they allege is a 2nd-degree felony. And they can't say whether she did it or whether Jodi did it, because it says that it's either she did it or someone taking care of them, that either she inflicted it or she allowed someone to inflict it on her. Either way, there was 2 women that had access to the home and 2 women that knew that this was going on in the house. So one of them did it, right? And they don't know which one. They could have done it together. So one of them is related to being tied up. The second one is related to his severe malnourishment. And the other one is related to emotional and severe developmental delays or an intellectual disability or his impairment, inability for the child to function. So whatever has happened was so severe, the kids are having a hard time it's a lot of trauma for them, and it's caused them delays and developmental issues. So there's also 3 counts related to EF. It doesn't include the same restraints and the same category as RF, but hers are again related to being malnourished, as well as the emotional side that RF got. And then she had sustained multiple injuries on multiple occasions. So they're charged with that, both her and Jodi. Now, Jodi and her have separate attorneys, and she has hired a man named Lamar Winward, who is a defense attorney in St. George, Washington County. He has been around the block for a long time. Some of his most notorious cases have to do with men that have been downloading CSAM. He had a really famous case a couple years ago where a teacher at a local academy was caught with hundreds of photos on his phone. And he tried to argue that this guy had autism and that he lacked empathy. And so therefore he didn't understand what he was doing, and tried to claim that a brain injury caused him to get involved with the CSAM. And he was asking for a reduced sentence. That guy got 22 and a half years, and he obviously didn't move the judge with that defense. Her hiring of this man maybe suggests to me she might be looking at the coercion side of things. She could be looking to say, I was brainwashed, I was under undue influence. It'll be interesting to see if Ruby and Jodi turn on each other, because they have 2 separate attorneys and they're going to have 2 separate defenses. And they're being tried in separate cases, but they are both going to be under the same judge. Now, Jodi, she hired an attorney today. Jodi hired an attorney named Douglas Terry, who's a defense attorney, and his admission is extensive in terms of what he's asking for discovery. You know, it's interesting because Ruby's attorney asked for pretty minimal discovery. He just wanted everything that they had. And Jodi's defense attorney is literally seeking, it's like 2 pages worth of discovery for what he wants them to hand over about this case. So they both have different defense attorneys. They're both being set to be arraigned on their charges on September 8th, 2023, which is on a Friday. And the arraignments, I believe, are live streamed via a web link that you can go into in St. George. However, under Utah law, you cannot live stream them to another platform. You cannot photograph it. You cannot videotape it. You cannot screen record it. So I will do my best to watch it and let you guys know how the arraignment goes. And if you're looking for a mugshot related to Ruby, unfortunately, under the law in the state of Utah, they do not release mugshots until someone is actually convicted of a crime, because everyone in the state of Utah and in the United States is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And both women are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. At this point, everything that we're talking about are just allegations of an investigation. So Jodi and Ruby's relationship has been kind of, I would say, pretty on par with what Jodi has done over the last years in her work in the mental health field. There's been a lot of misinformation about Jodi. There's been a lot of stuff, people saying her license is revoked, she can't work as a counselor. She actually has an active license as a clinical mental health therapist in the state of Utah. And she had a probationary period back in 2012 where she actually lost her license on probation. It was put on probation for 18 months due to her disclosing confidential information of a client to BYU trustee members, clergy, bishops, which negatively impacted a guy that had been recommended by the church to see Jodi for marriage counseling with his wife. So she was also sued in 2019 by a husband, by a man that says that Jodi interfered in his marriage with his wife and him, which resulted in convincing his wife, he alleged, to divorce him. And the same thing happened to the guy in 2012. I just want to share with you the account that was given by the man that was responsible for her license going on probation. Okay, so the gentleman's name is Adam Paul Steed. He had never publicly identified himself before, but he basically explained that he had relationship with Jodi where he was actually a client of hers, and that he was the one responsible for her license going on probation. He actually is a huge name in terms of he was one of the first people to sue the Boy Scouts of America, and he actually won a judgment against them for things that happened to him at one of their camps in Idaho. And he says that he was attending BYU, and he said, within months I was a pre-med student and an international relations student in the honors program finishing my junior year. Then catastrophe struck. Within months, I was single, not allowed to see my children, kicked out of school, not allowed to go to the temple anymore, deemed unworthy and treated like a danger. At one point, I was arrested and in jail for 14 days with 4 felony charges against me. My court fees were above $200,000, almost all in civil divorce court. I was ordered to take a lie detector test and a other test. I had a 500-page rap sheet at BYU's honor court office. I was treated like a perp of children. He said 9 months before it all began, my then wife and I had just finished a settlement with Boy Scouts of America, so we had money and we were recommended to take marriage counseling. The court case, which we were while going to school and taking care of the baby, were stressful on our marriage. So my bishop told me to go to Jodi Hildebrandt, my then wife, and I did. That was the single most destructive decision I had ever made in my life. I had no idea at the time that what this charismatic lady was actually capable of. And second, I didn't understand that some high up church leaders who have been watching me closely as a whistleblower were capable of to hide the truth a whistleblower could bring out in Utah with laws that could have helped victims come forward. I'm not going to go into the whole story here, but Jodi Hildebrandt was deeply embedded in the Mormon church with some leadership and was the main cause of my divorce with my ex-wife. She went illegally around spreading false information to my bishop, to BYU Honor Code office, and my civil divorce proceedings about me, and to many more. She had secret meetings with high-up Mormon leaders who suppressed the child ABOC and BSA in southeast Idaho. She basically convinced many people that I was super dangerous in response to me refusing to pay her $2,000 a month for counseling. She violated the doctor-patient privacy rules and started having a completely inappropriate relationship with my ex-wife and took huge amounts of money from us. The state of Utah's the Department of DOPL, which is who licensed them, charged her with having a dual relationship with my ex-wife, but it was too late. The damage was done. And there was not a romantic relationship with them. She allowed this woman to work in her office even after she had been giving her therapy, which is a violation of the ethics and the professional conduct. And so when my attorneys subpoenaed her, she had no records as a therapist, that I was dangerous. So all the lies she made up about me as her patient didn't only break policy, but were also unprofessional. So he woke up to see what happened, and he said, I never got vindication for the damage and abuse this woman did to my life. I just had to learn how to move on. I never thought I would get vindication in this life, but now all these public servants and church servants who hurt me under this woman's lies and deception will realize they were on the wrong side. They followed a truly violent cult leader instead of me. This woman is an absolute child ABUSER. She is a complete psychopath, and her body count of people's lives that she has destroyed dwarfs any of the people I've known, which says a lot, being me. So he's a pretty notable person. Again, he publicly identified himself, and everything that he's saying is actually proven by the probation and the judgments that were come in by DOPL. And she did lose her license for 18 months, and she was found to have unprofessional conduct. Then in 2019, a man in Washington County sued her for interfering in his relationship with his wife, leading to his divorce. And then he also claimed that Jodi tried to take over his business as a part of the divorce. After a lot of back and forth, he sued her for malpractice. They eventually settled. But it seems like Jodi has this propensity to divide families, cause divorces, and get really inappropriately connected to people that she's been treating. Where Ruby comes in is she had been seeing Jodi along with her family. She had sought help for her son, Chad. And here we are today where Ruby is separated from her husband, Kevin, and had kicked him out of the house. Neighbors said that he had not been around for a year. Kevin resurfaced recently. He showed up at Ruby and his shared marital home in Springville, Utah. He wasn't there for long. The Daily Mail actually shared photographs of him, and he was there with a man who was removing a decal from his van, which said YouTube 8 passengers, because YouTube has kicked her off the platform, terminated her channel, and has said that Ruby is never to be allowed back on YouTube because she's a repeat offender of community guideline standards. So Kevin wants to get custody of the kids, but right now the children are in protective custody and they're in with the state of Utah, and the 2 older children that are teenagers were located by police the next day. They were not harmed. They are not, her conduct in this specific case is not charged related to the 14 and the 16-year-old. It is only related to RF and EF. So Ruby is now going to be facing a lot of time behind bars. So there's been some miscommunication, I think, and assumptions about how much time she could be facing. In the state of Utah, the charges she's facing have a maximum sentence of 15 years. And most often than not, charges are run concurrently, meaning all at the same time, though judges can charge them consecutively, meaning they have to do one sentence right after the other. The state of Utah has a weird stipulation, though, that if you are charged with, say, 2 felonies that are in the 2nd degree and the maximum is 15 years for both, the maximum she could be sentenced to in total would be 30 years. So even though there's a total charge of 6 counts, which if you timed 6 by 15, you would get to 90, unfortunately, the maximum under Utah law would be 30 years. And that's assuming she would get the full amount and it goes to trial and she doesn't take a plea deal. At this point, she has lost custody of her children. She remains behind bars on a hold, and I will be continuing to update the story. I was interviewed last week on Fox News 13 with a whole host of about my experience covering the story, about how I was silenced and threatened by her lawyers. It sounds like neighbors have been trying and reporting Jodi and Ruby for a long time related to these kids. In fact, neighbors at Jodi's house reported that they had seen the kids outside pulling weeds for hours in triple-digit heat, and that they also had reported the kids and Jodi to CPS regarding the welfare of these children. And those neighbors down there said the children's seemed to be deteriorating, and they were concerned the kids would be coming out of the home in body bags. This is a super sad development, and it's not like, I think we all could have seen an arrest coming. I don't think anyone could have expected the severity of what was happening. But for now, the kids are in protective custody. Her sister uploaded a video very shortly to her YouTube channel and expressed that they had tried to do everything they possibly could do legally, but they had also been cut off. So Jodi's whole teaching is about, if someone is in distortion, which she believes is like what everything is bad. Anything that you do in your life that's bad, is distortion. And everything that is good is truth. And so if your family doesn't agree with the teachings that Jodi teaches, the people that she brainwashes are told to cut them off and set boundaries. So Ruby had basically cut everyone out of her life other than Jodi, including all of her family, her husband, even her adult children. For those of you wondering about Chad, I spoke to his college roommate, and he was at BYU last school year, and he was living outside of his parents in an apartment, and then moved to a different apartment later in the year. So that's what I have for today. She has been charged with 6 counts of aggravated CA. She and Jodi both have hired attorneys. Their arraignment is scheduled for September 8th, 2023. Both are being held without bond, and I will have more updates in the coming days. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.